Story 1. I put a stick-on Autobot badge on the back of my first car. It was, to put it mildly, an old vehicle. I drove it to work the next day and met a colleague as I was getting out. He said, "Autobot logo, right?" Feeling pretty pleased that someone recognized it, I replied, "Yeah, that's right." He asked, "Cool. So what does it transform into?" "A car." Story 2. A student asked me about condoms during sex education. I was explaining the process when he said, "I've always wondered about that barcode at the base of every condom." I responded, "I've never seen barcodes at the bottom of condoms." He smiled and said, "Oh, I guess you don't have to roll yours down that far, huh?" I had to give it to him. I just laughed and laughed. Story 3. I have Parkinson's disease, and a coworker occasionally asks me, "What's shaking?" I laugh every time. Story 4. It wasn't said to me but to a friend of mine at university. As much as we were good friends, I have to admit she was the kind of girl who thought she deserved all the attention. She came into our design studio fuming over a message she had received from a guy she was trying to connect with that read, "Words cannot describe how beautiful I think you are, but numbers can." 3 out of 10. Story 5. I introduced myself to a woman while tending bar, and she jokingly sang a little rhyme of my first and last name, the cock jerker, before catching herself and apologizing profusely. She often used rhymes to remember people's names, and this was the first thing that came to her mind. How I made it to my mid-20s without realizing my name rhymed perfectly with cock jerker. I'll never know. It makes me wonder why that phrase never occurred to my peers in middle school. Story 6. I visited a new doctor who was assessing my cognition. I mentioned, "I complete the New York Times crossword every day." Without hesitation, she responded, "Do you ever finish it?" She remains my doctor. Story 7. I once called my friend a coward as a joke, and his response was, "Well then, you better do it now because I'm the only one you're going to get." That was 10 years ago. I still remember it to this day. It still burns. Story 8. While playing a video game, I was told, "The only difference between cancer and your aim is that cancer actually kills people." He kind of had a point. Story 9. Overheard. At a gym next to me, a slender man is being trained by his friend. As he struggles to finish the overhead dumbbell press, his friend says, "Come on, give me one more. No wonder your girlfriend left you, and you drive a Hyundai." He managed to complete that extra repetition. Story 10. I always prided myself on being a barbecue expert, having learned all my skills from my mother, who was the master of fire and iron. I learned so much about cooking on the charcoal grill that it even impressed my in-laws, who were notoriously fussy eaters when they came over for dinner. My mother-in-law once said to my wife, "Sweetie, you're so lucky you get to eat like this whenever you want. Your future children are going to be so happy at dinner time. Speaking of which, your dad and I are still waiting. When are you going to give us some grandchildren to play with?" To which my wife replied, "Yeah, if he spent as much time with me as he does pounding the meat for dinner, we would have had them by now." Yes, 8 years later, it still gets brought up. And yes, we have a child now, in case you were wondering. Story 11. There is a memorable moment in the movie Titanic when Rose says to Cal early in the sinking, "I would rather be his lover than your wife." Story 12. My 9-year-old watched me make a mistake, and I apologized for it. He said, "It's okay, Mom. Everyone makes mistakes. I mean, look at your parents." Story 13. I was singing. Hey, who sings that? Adele, I think. Let's keep it that way. It would have been devastating if I had been a poor singer. Well done, Lexi. Story 14. I work as a psychiatric nurse. One night, the police brought us a new manic patient. She refused to take her medication, attempted to hit and bite us, and screamed continuously. After trying to give her medication and talking to her while she constantly insulted us, we had to cuff her to the bed. We attempted several times that night to give her medication. At one point, I thought she was actually going to take them. She said, "Okay, I'm taking them, but you first have to fill half a cup with water." I complied, growing more optimistic. She then said, "Now fill the other half with apple juice." Sure thing, I was happy to do it. "Now get me a straw." Of course, why not? It seemed like a reasonable request, so I fetched her a straw. "Now take that straw and shove it up your stinky ass." I paused for a moment, not fully realizing what had just happened. Then I couldn't hold back my laughter any longer and left the room. My colleagues were watching the entire scene through a camera in her room and couldn't stop laughing either. Story 15. I brought a new boyfriend to church one Easter. I'm from an incredibly small southern town in the United States where gossip is rampant, so I wasn't surprised when a nosy older woman approached us and asked for an introduction. Before I could say anything, however, she raised her hand and said, "Never mind. I know there will be a new boyfriend by the 4th of July, and I don't want to get attached." Before walking away with the sassiness of a character from Downton Abbey, I was mortified, but that didn't stop me from bursting into nervous laughter, while my boyfriend just stared in disbelief. In my defense, I was a bit of a commitment phobe, but I had only ever brought one guy to church before, 2 years prior. That didn't stop the older woman from being right. We were over before June. Story 16. A player was upsetting a girl in a video game during a group raid. She responded with, "If you don't stop, I'm going to sleep with your dad and give him the son he always wished for." I'm not sure if there was any comeback or if the player ever recovered from that remark. Note: I read this a while ago, so I may not have paraphrased it accurately. Story 17. In high school, I had an emo hairstyle with bangs in the front, and I was told to calm down, Yu-Gi-Oh! The class laughed, including me. It was amazing. Story 18. One of my family members is very short. She is almost in her 30s and is the same height as a 10 to 12-year-old. She usually gets cold and catches the flu a lot, so one day I said, "Maybe the reason you are getting sick all the time is that you are short enough to be under the weather." Story 19. I told a female friend, "I have a little problem." She replied, "I know. It's in your pants." I laughed so hard. She really got me good. Story 20. Not me, but during boot camp, one of the drill instructors told a recruit, "You're such a virgin, I bet you were delivered by C-section." I ended up doing at least 100 push-ups because I couldn't stop laughing. Story 21. You look like you have to think about which chin to use when you talk. Honestly, I was so impressed that I didn't have words. Story 22. I shaved my head bald, and straight after school, my 7-year-old glanced at me and said, "Wow, One Punch Man." Then he continued inside. Story 23. You should have heard a dad say to his son during a father-son golf tournament after the son hit a bad shot. Story 24. When I posted to Roast Me, one person said I had a Cro-Magnon forehead and volcanoes all over my face. I also received comments like, "Somebody left Matt Damon in the oven too long," and, my favorite, "Fat Damon." Story 25. I was really short in junior and senior high and carried the nickname Half Nelson from a sitcom about a little person throughout. Story 26. I overheard a man at the local pub boasting and completely exaggerating his involvement in a fight that had occurred the previous week. He was just finishing his story about how he had taken on 3 guys by himself when his friend loudly declared, "Get away, boy," and then you woke up. I nearly spewed Guinness through my nose in an attempt to stop laughing, as the exaggerator fell silent for the rest of the evening. Story 27. I remember someone in middle school during the 1980s putting a lot of effort into calling me derogatory names. It felt more like, "I am not even upset." That was disappointing. Story 28. I was caught in traffic and ended up stuck in the middle of an intersection, slightly blocking traffic turning left. Cars were still able to turn safely, but I felt foolish. This minor inconvenience really upset a man making the turn. We made eye contact, and he pointed a finger gun at me while telling me to leave. I clasped my chest, pretended to be shot, closed my eyes and played dead for a moment, then flicked him off with both hands. If that wasn't bad enough, his partner started laughing uncontrollably. I watched this man's demeanor change dramatically. I will never forget that interaction, and I hope he doesn't either. Story 29. A person experiencing homelessness wanted to clean my windshield. I told him, "No, I'm a wildlife biologist and drive in the desert, so it will get dirty again immediately." He replied, "I hope you don't have the same attitude about personal hygiene." I paid him to clean my windshield. Story 30. I was an 18-year-old working manual labor in a crew of about 10, headed by a journeyman carpenter. One day, while trying to pound a rebar with a sledgehammer, I missed it on my first swing and then grazed it but hit myself square in the ankle with the second. He stopped me and asked if I had gotten laid yet, which I hadn't. He replied that he would give a year's salary to watch me because it would be the most awkward, hilarious moment he had ever seen. Story 31. During the summer before I went into junior high, my parents bought my grandparents' house. There was a fair amount of remodeling inside and landscaping outside. My dad told me to move a huge pile of rocks from the yard to the corner of the pasture. He gave me a week to do it, expecting me to use a wheelbarrow and take the entire week. During my explorations of the new place, I found a pile of lumber along with hardware and wheels for a wagon. I spent a day building a wagon to pull behind our lawn tractor and a day moving the rocks. That meant I had the rest of the week to do whatever I wanted. My dad, in an attempt to insult me, said, "You'll always find the easiest way to do a job, won't you?" Instead of saying yes, I was smart enough to put on a blank stare. It was at that point that I realized he was just giving me busy work to keep me out of the way. Story 32. That one that went viral on TikTok had me laughing at every repost. It was, "Yeah, well, you look easy to draw." Story 33. I worked for a software company as a product manager. This was my first job in this role, and I was eager to do whatever I could. My manager asked me to conduct corporate research. I sent out exploratory emails from a personal address to our competitors, inquiring about their products. Most were happy to set up a demo and provide information about their offerings, except for one competitor from England. They sent me a strange email. My company's name was, let's say, AAA BBB. Their email stated they were willing to share any information I wanted about their new AAA salmon and BBB trout products. It took me a while to comprehend their message. They had checked the IP address of my email and traced it back to my company. So they wrote, "We know you're fishing, idiot." I had never felt so impressed and humiliated at the same time. Story 34. I was sick with bronchitis and a sinus infection. One of my friends stopped by to see how I was doing. He took one look at me and said, "How's the healthiest person in Chernobyl doing today?" I gave him a look of defeat mixed with respect for such a quick and well-put-together roast. Story 35. I was told, "You seem like you still have themed birthday parties," when I got excited about a new Lego set being released. Story 36. I gave one performance that I'm still proud of. I was the first cellist in a string ensemble, and our conductor was gesturing with his baton during rehearsal one evening. He swung his arm back and accidentally almost jammed it into an electrical socket. He said, "Wow, I have to be careful. I could have electrocuted myself." I replied, "Don't worry, you would have been fine. You're a terrible conductor." My brain caught up to what I had said about 5 seconds later, and I stumbled over myself apologizing, but the entire orchestra had already broken down laughing. I got a free pass on that one. Story 37. More brutal than good. But when I was in school, someone told the kid everyone knew was adopted, "I would insult your mother, but you have too many." Story 38. Not me, but I was there to witness it. The oldest guy in the shop is M. He's only 38, but the younger guys joke about him being the old guy in the shop. He's also here about 10 minutes before everyone else as he is the floor lead. M was running late and it was really close to the buzzer. As he opens the door and doesn't even have a foot in the door, B, who is 26, asks him, "Did your walker freeze to the ground?" 10 guys had a laughing fit, and M, to his credit, didn't turn around and go home. Story 39. I worked at a high-volume bakery during the middle of summer before the 4th of July, which meant we were working about 12 days in a row. It was hot, tiring, and stressful. I was the oven operator, and the seeder for the buns had been malfunctioning for a week. I called my supervisor to complain about it again. Why don't you be a good Jewish person and hop onto the belt into the oven where you belong? I usually don't get offended, but as soon as that phrase left his mouth, his face turned as white as our uniforms. I was stunned, but then I started laughing. To me, it was funny and something I had never been told before. It was just perfect. That comment could have warranted a visit from Human Resources, but honestly, whatever. Story 40. A scammer called my phone and gave me his pre-made lines to scam me. I asked, "Do you respect Donald Trump's penis?" He replied, "No, but I respect your mom's vagina." He got me good, and even my crew was laughing at me because we were on speakerphone. Another scammer called me one day while I was doing landscaping, and he was trying to sell me some Google Voice nonsense. I said, "Get a real job instead of trying to scam people." He responded, "Like what? Cutting grass?" He got me there too, but I still make more money than him. Story 41. Never received it, but I give it a lot of thought. I'm a heavier person, so I often get comments about my weight. My response is generally, "You know why I'm so heavy? Because every time I spend time with your wife, she makes cupcakes." Story 42. Back in 2006, I walked into a bodega in Harlem, where I was living, and someone shouted, "Oh wow, it's Tom from MySpace." I had no response. Story 43. It was actually my younger brother. We somehow found ourselves in a random chat group back when MSN Messenger was popular. One person in the group was trash talking. My brother said, "Move over, I got this." After some back and forth, one of the statements had spelling errors. My younger brother replied, "Stop letting your dad drag across the keyboard while you're using him. Your spelling is terrible." It's been a good 20 years since that day. I'm still proud of him. Story 44. My coworker was in his 30s and I was in my early 20s. I mentioned something about getting older and he responded, "When you were still a baby, I was already out in the world." I couldn't be mad. I was laughing too hard. Story 45. I have a medical issue. There is a connection from my colon to my vagina. This means I cannot control flatulence at all. A friend started calling me Queen Laquifa. I was annoyed, but I had to admit it was brilliant. Story 46. Not the best, but the funniest thing I heard was when a friend of mine told me, "Your mom is so old. She owns Jesus 5 pounds. I couldn't stop laughing. Story 47. You seem like the type of person who would do anything for bus fare and then walk home. Although it wasn't directed at me, I still find it extremely funny. I've been eager to use it ever since I heard it. Story 48. I said to the boss, "Not all heroes wear capes." After doing a good job. He replied quickly, "Not all cowboys ride horses." I laughed so hard. Story 49. This was years ago, but it still makes me laugh as a science fiction fan. Your mother's features are flappier than Jar Jar Binks's ears. Story 50. My mom goes to the doctor for her annual physical. She is a retired nurse and knows many health practitioners on a personal level. She steps on the scale, and the doctor says, "Now, Evelyn, do you want me to tell you this as your friend or as your doctor?" Mom, thinking friends are usually nicer than medical professionals and noting that she had put on weight in retirement, replied, "Tell me as a friend." The doctor responded, "Well, you've gotten bigger." Story 51. I was talking to my younger coworker about how I used to use dial-up internet, and he said, "It's time to delete Hinge. You've just dated yourself." Story 52. My sister was walking in a mall with her friend when they passed by a group of guys. Someone called out, "Hey, Dreamboat." She turned around to look, and one of them said, "Not you, shipwreck, your friend." Story 53. I got called Townhouse Gums because my gums show when I smile. It makes me laugh every time I think about it because she was right. Story 54. Not an insult to me, but two older gentlemen were arguing over a parking space that one believed the other had taken. It almost got physical until one of the wives intervened. His parting remark was, "If you ever go on Mastermind, your specialist subject is going to be, how much of a jerk can I be?" Story 55. My former boss was joking about firing me. I replied, You can't fire me. I'm irreplaceable. He retorted, Is that what your ex-husband said? And no, that's not why I left the job. I laughed and we exchanged witty remarks like that all the time. Story 56. I used to enjoy growing a beard and then shaving it for shock value. I did this at one job, and a local friend saw me and said, Don't worry, I look like a pedophile when I shave too. It was amusing. I haven't fully shaved since, and it's been about 10 years. Story 57. Me. Look, class, I'm not much older than you. I'm pretty hip and up to date on the current language. Student, Mr. Teacher, the only hip I heard was the sound of yours breaking. Story 58. Playing poorly wasn't going well, and I received a comment saying, You couldn't hit water if you fell out of a boat in the middle of the ocean. Okay, I admit it, you're right. Story 59. Construction job, conversation in the brake trailer. A skilled woman is telling a couple of young men what they needed to do. Once she finished, one of them said, What about Cletus? Without batting an eye, she replied, A grocery bag with eye holes. Legend. Story 60. I dyed my hair during a break in my senior year, and on the first day back, my English teacher started giving me a hard time about it. Half the class joined in, so I put my head down on my desk and said, I want to hide. She responded, No one with purple hair wants to hide. I laughed hard enough that I wasn't embarrassed anymore. Story 61. My wife and I were having an argument. My weak response was, I'm only human. To which she replied, Would you like a second opinion? Stung, but it was insightful. Story 62. I got the original Apple Watch on its release to celebrate my first job offer as an attorney after graduating from law school, pending bar passage. I went on a trip shortly afterward and tried scanning my boarding pass with the watch, but it wouldn't work. The line started teasing me, and one guy called me a Walmart spy kid. I don't think I ever fully recovered. Story 63. Not me. A friend was battling cancer. He had started chemotherapy, lost his hair, and generally looked unwell. He made it a point to tell us all that he didn't want to be treated any differently because the pity would make him feel worse. Another friend had recently gotten engaged. That friend showed up at a party we were all attending and saw our cancer-stricken friend without hair for the first time. The first thing he said was, So, would it be in poor taste to ask for the wedding present now? There was one more incident involving the same supportive guy. We had another friend who spent some time crab fishing in Alaska. He was in town but was heading back to Alaska in a few weeks. That friend beat our hero in a video game and started talking trash, as you do. Our friend responded, I hope your mother cries over your empty coffin. Story 64. It was spoken in my native language, so I'm going to translate it into English. It may not be as funny or witty in English. Me. Has allergic rhinitis and blows my nose hard into a tissue. Him, whoa, easy there. You might blow your brains out, literally. Me. If you blow your nose really hard, only mucus will come out. He was insulted but found it funny, so we laughed together, and he wasn't mad afterward. Story 65. I'm old. Back when three-way calling was popular, I was on the phone with my friend and a girl he knew. My friend and I were talking, and I told the girl, This is an A-B conversation. See your way out. Without missing a beat, she replied, You might be January and February, but I'm marching my way back in. Another time, I was teasing a coworker. I have a lazy eye, and after I made a joke about him, he said, Look at me with both eyes. Story 66. I worked at a preschool summer camp during high school for volunteer hours. One time, a child came up to me, waved at my face and asked, Why do you have bug bites all over? I had not figured out how to deal with my acne yet. It was frustrating, but I thought it was hilarious. Story 67. To provide context, I have had a brain tumor removed successfully, and it was a good friend. Story 68. Not mine, but in grade 8 we had a first-year teacher. He was absent the day before, and my friend asked him where he was. He said, Oh, I had some friends in from out of town, so I decided to call in and show them a good time. Without skipping a beat, my friend replied, What were your friends' names? Jack Daniels and Jim Beam. Legendary. Story 69. Didn't receive this directly, but the best one I've ever heard is your rear jealous of the nonsense that comes out of your mouth? Story 70. I was the new guy at work and I was giving my cell phone number to my director. She's a kind older lady. When I gave her my number, she said out loud, in front of the office, "That number is on the men's room wall. It says, for a mediocre time, give it a call." I felt embarrassed by a sweet old lady. Story 71. A colleague and his wife brought lunch groceries in at the beginning of the week. In the lunchroom on Friday, he emptied the now rumpled paper sack, turned to me, and with the most ambiguous pause, said, "Do you want this old bag?" Story 72. My kids were arguing. Instead of asking if the other was upset, one turned to the other and said to put some bacon on it. I don't know why I laughed so hard. The other child was really angry. Story 73. Someone said I looked like John Candy. I didn't know who he was until my friend told me about the movie Uncle Buck. Story 74. A girl I attended high school with was less than 5 feet tall, but had a reputation that far exceeded her stature. Her detractors called her low-ho. She believed that any press was good press. Story 75. I was commenting on my grandson's red eyes one morning. He said, "Have you ever looked in a mirror in the morning? Every day, your eyes look like you've been up all night." Great comeback, kid. Story 76. An ex and I were arguing, and he ended the disagreement by saying, "You're not feminine enough to be a bad person, so you're just a jerk." I couldn't help but laugh, and to this day, it's my favorite insult. Story 77. I went out in Piccadilly Circus for St. Patrick's Night at an Irish pub. I asked an Irish man at the bar, "Are you here for the comedy?" He replied, "Why, are you one of the acts?" It was crowded, but overall it was pretty good. Story 78. I went on a roast forum and someone called me Skeletor, which cracked me up because I was obese for most of my life and commented as such. Then, a secondary comment made a remark about how they could no longer unsee Gandalf the Grey's beard on a mastiff. It really made me laugh. Story 79. I once participated in a roast battle with a 13-year-old boy from Argentina, and I learned the hard way not to pick a fight if you don't know the language. I translated everything he said afterward, and he commented, "I bet your hole is big from all the guys up in there." Yes, a 13-year-old boy said that. Story 80. I was talking with a few coworkers, and I can't remember how the conversation got here, but at one point I said, "Hey, I'm not that gay." Without missing a beat, one of them turned to me and said, "I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're pretty fabulous." Story 81. I told a coworker that I love little things. He replied, "I guess your husband is glad to hear that." Story 82. My friend and I were joking. He mentioned something about my deceased dog, and I said, "At least my dog didn't eat 3 baby kittens." He got mad and replied, "At least my dog didn't get cancer." I looked at him and said, "You sleep with anything that breathes." He responded, "Your mom is 6 feet underground and still dating." I just laughed. Story 83. I once made a costly mistake at work, and I told a friend I couldn't believe how absolutely and unequivocally foolish I was. He said, "Ah, come on. You're not that foolish." Story 84. During spring break, my friends are all fit from working out. I had just started exercising, so I wasn't very fit, and a guy looked at us, then at me and said, "Oh, you must be the navigator?" Story 85. The corrections supervisor was handling an inmate who called her a Brillo pad. She wasn't even mad. She has curly, poodle-like hair. Story 86. I can't think of any for myself, but with permission from my husband, he shared his experience, and it's the best thing I've ever heard. He said that when he was in school, a bully asked him something along the lines of, "So you want to fight?" My husband responded, "No, I'm a pacifist." The bully then told him, "I'll pass a fist on your jaw." Story 87. I am 5 feet 6 inches tall and had a long beard at the time. My 6'8" friend walked up while I was splitting wood for the smoker and said I looked like a small bunion. I was laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. Story 88. A girl I went to high school with was around 6 feet tall and was rather large. Her surname began with Mac, like McAllister. I won't use her real name. Anyway, someone came up with the nickname Big Mac. She took it pretty well and even referred to herself by it. Story 89. My friend and I were having an argument about something. I knew I was right and he knew I was right, he was just being provocative. After I explained my point, he looked me in the eyes and said, "Go to the restroom and take your face for a bow. That's how you win an argument, even when you're wrong." Story 90. I'm so skinny that even the Grim Reaper would be jealous. This was before I finally gained a few pounds. Story 91. I'm a female with naturally red hair. Someone called me raggedy and I burst out laughing. It was funny. Story 92. I was working as a licensed social worker clinician in a residential treatment facility for teenage girls. I received a lot of insults and developed a thick skin. One time, I was told that I should sue whoever trained me because I was so bad at my job. I was impressed and a little hurt, which was surprising because I thought I had heard everything by then. Story 93. I watched an 8-year-old try to urinate in my coffee cup, but it was on a table, so he ended up splattering everywhere instead. I wasn't angry at first. It quickly became too ridiculous to be mad because who does that? Story 94. I had a science teacher explaining the mating habits of praying mantises. Another student was annoying the teacher, but I started laughing, and the teacher remarked, "I don't know why he's laughing about something he doesn't understand." I was more annoyed by the fact that he waited to pounce on someone else rather than address the person causing a distraction in the class. Story 95. My friends and I were playing Call of Duty. We didn't have a good match against the other team. At the end, one of the players on the other team said we played like a bunch of silly people. We all died laughing. Story 96. My sister set my ringtone to "I Want to Be Sedated" by the Ramones. To be fair, I was taking a lot of prescription pain medication. Story 97. At school lunch, half the gym was set up with tables for eating, while the other half was playing dodgeball. A dodgeball hit my table, and I yelled, "Control your balls." A middle schooler yelled back, "Control your mouth." Story 98. We met an Australian couple in Japan in September 2018. We were talking about how we would love to visit Australia, but the thought of some of the animals frightened us. Without missing a beat, the man responded, "I would rather deal with some critters than face the threat of being shot." We were left speechless. Story 99. It was once fun to tell each other that you suck. It soon evolved from you suck to you swallow, and well, you enjoy it. Story 100. I was told that I looked like the love child of Weird Al and Mrs. Doubtfire. I am not even slightly mad about it. Story 101. I am a 5'8" male with orange hair and a 1-inch full beard. I was working for a foundation repair company when my superintendent, who did not know my name yet, called me Dildo Faggins. I am a huge fan of The Lord of the Rings and had the One Ring as my wedding band, which made my year and had me laughing. Story 102. I originally heard these in Spanish, but I will translate and leave them here. I envy the strangers who have not met you yet. The reason you get no daylight is that things dry in the sun. Story 103. When my niece was 4, she drew her mom, dad, brother, herself, her uncle, my brother, her cousin, my niece, and me. They were all stick figures, and I was a square person because I am overweight. My siblings immediately started complimenting my niece, saying, "Oh yes, the square matches your aunt's shirt color very well. This is pretty. Let's put it on the fridge. You draw what you see. Nice work." Story 104. I was told I'm built like an improper fraction, and I actually laughed. That one was good. For reference, I have a large chest, a small waist, and an unfortunately flat backside. She was right, honestly. Story 105. I was talking about something on Facebook the other day, and my friend said I was having a live journal-like crash out, and I laughed so hard. We've known each other since the live journal days. Story 106. I was asked if I said, "I'm not even mad. Use proper English. Get your act together and ask better questions. Story 107. My close friend once told me I wasn't pretty enough to be that foolish. It made me laugh a lot, and I still use that saying today. Story 108. A friend had a significant overbite. I didn't really notice it as a condition. It was just how he looked. It had caused him temporomandibular joint problems and headaches, so he had to undergo surgery to correct his jaw. He was telling me about it, and I said, "Okay, the Habsburg jaw." He didn't understand the reference. He continued discussing his preparation for the surgery, mentioning that he was gaining weight because his jaw would be wired shut and that all he could eat were smoothies. I sent him an image to look at. The next day he responded. Took him that long because he was upset. He texted back, "I have never been so insulted by something I completely agreed with." He did find it funny later on. After the surgery and recovery, he feels and looks a lot better. However, he mentioned that it was the worst insult he ever received, especially one that was so offhand coming from a close friend. Story 109. Mine is just crazy, but I still think about it sometimes. In high school, I was paired up with a guy who seemed quiet and nerdy, not very attractive. To my surprise, he completely caught me off guard in just 5 minutes by saying, "Yeah, I've seen you laughing to yourself a lot in the hallways, and I honestly thought you were retarded." He didn't use that exact word, but I was literally speechless. Who says that to someone? I do smile and laugh to myself a lot, but that was so intense. Story 110. My older sister told me, "You may have a good body, a big penis, and a pretty face, but that doesn't mean you can be with any girl you want. She's your niece." For background, I had just returned home after serving overseas. I hadn't seen my sister in 12 years, and the last time I saw her, I had slept with her best friend. My nieces were 4 years old, 3 years old, and 6 months old at that time. She effectively implied that I had slept with my underage niece. I was devastated, and she criticized me with insults for a year, even getting me in trouble at work over it. When my brother-in-law died, it turned out that the girl I slept with was his daughter from a previous marriage, and she was 24. Not exactly an insult, but I had to give her credit. Yes, I was a terrible uncle and an even worse brother. Story 111. I try my best not to get angry, as I've learned through bad experiences that acting in anger usually ends poorly for myself and others. Any insult aimed at me is swiftly deflected with an extremely immature response. "I know you are, but what am I? I will repeat this if necessary." People may think I'm crazy at the time, but it has always de-escalated the situation without any negative consequences. Story 112. I was in a group chat and received an insult. I sent an image related to a controversial topic that included inappropriate characters. Accusations were made, and one friend denied being the main character of the image. I mentioned that the individuals in question were too old for him, indicating that they were practically unsuitable for him. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.